There was hunger, there was peace, there was a sweetness, there was kids praying for kids, people at the altar. It was such a moment you didn't want to leave and you didn't want it to end. You said, I'm part of, this is what we've been crying out for. And if everybody could experience this, it would change the church. It would change the nation. And so to be there that night for hours was a gift I'll never forget. It changed me.
Folks, welcome back. Now, all through this show, I've been teasing the idea that while I'm sitting here doing this show, my friend, Malachi O'Brien, is out there running the streets of New York, completing what is meant to be his 152nd consecutive marathon, one per day. I mentioned that yesterday I ran part of his 151st consecutive marathon with him. The question is, will he make it to the studio in time to be on this program so that you can meet him? And here's the good news. Yes, here he is. Malachi, welcome.
Eric, thanks for having me.
Malachi, look, you just finished running a marathon today before the program. You just finished, you got here, they put makeup on you, and here you are.
Yes.
You have finished running your 152nd consecutive marathon. I want to shake your hand. I am honored that this would work out, that you came to New York to do these 2 marathons in New York City so that you could come on the program. I don't know where to begin. Let's just start with the fact that you're planning to fly home tonight, Kansas City, and to run your final 153rd marathon at home among your family, or simple question. I've been talking to you a lot about this, but my audience doesn't have a clue. First of all, if somebody says to you, apart from running these marathons, what do you do in your regular life when you're not breaking records? Who are you?
Well, I have a family. People go, how are you married? The answer is yes. My first wife and I have been married 21 years, so still married to her. We have 5 kids, and obviously I pastor a church in the Kansas City area. I'm an entrepreneur and involved in a lot of things. And people go, how do you do all that? I go, well, first off, there's no balance in my life. I'm not trying to live a balanced life. A balanced life is a boring life. I live an obsessed life. And so that's what I've been doing.
This is why I love you, because you're crazy in the right way. It's very important to be crazy, but in the right way. You, now to your kids, do they still recognize Daddy?
They don't remember my name.
They forgot about you.
Yeah.
No, but you've been doing most of this running. You've been doing in the neck of the woods at home. Your wife obviously is a saint to allow you to break a world record, which you broke over a month ago. Mm-hmm. And you're going home today. But you are someone that, to even think about, I want to break a Guinness World Record, and it's not like balancing billiard balls on my nose. It's to run consecutive marathons. You've done it. What gave you the idea to do this, especially at this point in your life? You're a young man, you're 39, but you run a church, you've got kids, you've got all this. It's just...
Yeah, I think the origin story, and you know this because we're close friends, there are 2 traumatic events in the life of our family that really are causes I've been running for. One would be youth mental health, and the other one would be adoption foster care. A little over a year ago, you know the story, my oldest daughter attempted to take her own life, and that kind of woke my wife and I up to the need of just youth mental health and what the next generation's facing. And then we got involved in a foster care situation that we ended up adopting a young man out of the foster care system. But in the midst of that, we realized how broken the system is and how overwhelmed the system is. And so those were 2 causes that I decided I wanted to run for. But really, this is kind of mind-boggling to some people. I had a conversation with Tony Robbins, the Tony Robbins, about a year ago during a live Facebook challenge he was doing, and just for about a minute.
So when you talk about Tony Robbins, you're talking about how does he describe himself? He's the something guru. What is he?
He's the world's #1 most well-known life and business strategist. He's coached people like Oprah Winfrey, you name it, famous athletes. He actually coached Bill Clinton. He is the most renowned business strategist in the world.
And life coach.
Life
guy.
coach.
But he's the guy who is like about, like smashing the ceiling. Like we're not going to, he's the one that does the fire walks. And it's we don't need to get into that now, but you're a profound Christian pastor, and we can talk about that. You're a student of revival. You're big in prayer and fasting, but you're saying about a year ago you met with Tony Robbins.
Yeah, I had a conversation with him, and he said, if anyone wants to change your life, you have to change your identity. And so that got me thinking. And he said, if you want to do something big, you got to take massive action now. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do something I've never done before. And I just heard about a lady, Jackie Huntz-Boozma, who was a blade runner. She lost half her leg to cancer, and she was in the midst of breaking the women's Guinness World Record for consecutive marathons. And it's one thing to do it with 2 legs, but to do it with 1 leg and then a blade, that's another thing. And so I just said, I'm going to do it. And I didn't think about it, and that's a good thing.
It's obvious you didn't think about it, because if you thought about it, you might not have done it.
Sure. I applied to Guinness, and months later, I heard back from them that I had approval to attempt the world record.
Okay, you applied. See, people don't know this, and I don't even know that I knew this fully. So you decide based on what Tony Robbins says. Now, again, we get into this whole theological thing. When you accept Jesus, you become a new person, right? This is what I believe, right? So this is a truism. What Tony Robbins is saying is it's true, but it doesn't need to end with when you accept Jesus. Now, there's this whole concept of being a new person. We don't need to get into that right now, but I'm saying that you accepted that as a concept, even though you are a new person in Christ. You're walking with God. You love your family, whatever. You're not like a wreck.
No.
But you just decided you wanted to embrace this concept. And then you're telling me that, so you say, yeah, I'm going to do that. And you have to apply to the Guinness Book of World Records, so this could be potentially official.
Yeah, if you don't apply, it's not official. There's a lot of people that have run marathons or done other things, but if you haven't applied before you do this, it doesn't count. And then if they accept you, they send you a list of rules that are ridiculous for documentation, record keeping, and how you have to complete every single marathon. I have 15 terabytes of video footage that I've got to turn into Guinness. I've got a running log of every day. I've got thousands of pictures I've got to give to them so they can verify that I actually did this. There's a whole process in that.
So part of our run yesterday, I saw you. We had to stop every 5 miles for you to change the battery on the GoPro because you're videotaping the whole thing.
Yeah, and you're part of the history now. Literally, somebody at Guinness is going to see you in the video. You're part of history now, which is phenomenal.
I just have to say that it was so much fun running with you yesterday, because I thought, when would I ever do this? I ended up running 22 miles, which is insane. Now, we did, of course, walk little bits and stuff, and it's a slower pace than my normal running pace, because this is about endurance. This is about completing this insane distance. But what boggles my mind, Malachi, is that you let me just taste it yesterday. I ran once like 5 miles with you back in the beginning when we were in Pennsylvania, right? So I ran like 5 miles. But this was like to taste what this is. And then I thought to myself, okay, I ran 22 miles. You ran 26.2 miles yesterday. And today you just finished. And the day before, and the day before, and the day before. So I still want to know what prepped you. When you get this idea like, oh, I'm going to do that, you must have had a background that like, oh yeah, I can do distance running, or that's in my wheelhouse potentially.
Yeah, I've been an ultra runner. I've self-identified as a semi-professional ultra runner.
Okay.
But I actually...
That needs to be said, because just in case somebody's like, I'm going to do that, it's like, no. You have done ultra running, and ultra running means?
Any distance over 26.2 miles. So I've done 2 100-mile races. I actually did not finish the first ever ultra I competed in, which is a 50-mile race, because I didn't know how to make it through the moment where your body wants to quit. You're in so much pain. You have to learn to go into the pain cave. I was telling you about that yesterday. Find another gear and get out of it. I didn't know that the first time around, but I learned it the second and the third time around.
But isn't it also because, I think you told me this yesterday on our run, this is the fun thing about running with you, is like we had this wonderful fellowship talking and stuff. You didn't you just like run at at a pace that was too fast?
Oh yeah, when so back in 2012 when I ran the ultra that I quit, the 50-mile race, the weekend before I ran a 3:14 marathon, which isn't bad.
Okay, excuse me. You're crazy. You ran a 3:12 marathon. I am very impressed. You ran a 3:12 marathon, and then you decide a week later to run an ultra marathon.
Yeah, I was David Goggins before David Goggins was David Goggins, and I tried to do that.
Nobody knows who David Goggins is except you just told me about him yesterday.
Yeah,
he's a marathon. He's an ultra marathon maniac.
He's an inspirational person, and so I ran too fast. And it's kind of one of those metaphors. Every day I'm learning things the Lord's teaching me just about life in general. I ran too fast, and I wasn't prepared. You know, some people don't realize there is a pace to these things.
Okay, hold on. First of all, we're going to be back. Plenty more. Malachi, I cannot believe we're sitting here, 152 consecutive marathons. Today, you just finished 152. Tomorrow, the final one. We'll be right back. We don't normally do this on this program. We don't normally have a freewheeling Marx Brothers approach to the program. But today, I said, if we can do this, Malachi O'Brien, my friend, you and I ran yesterday. You did your 151st consecutive marathon. Tomorrow in New York, you're going to attempt to run your 152nd consecutive marathon. Could you do it before the program so that you could be on the program and talk about it? And you did it. I heard you leave my house this morning because Georgie barked at like 6:30 a.m. or something like that. Georgie barked. I was like, Georgie, shut up. It's Malachi. He's going on a run. You just finished. You made a decision. There's a lot to talk about, but you made a decision, when you broke the record of 104, at what point do you say enough? Like, how does that work?
I didn't know how to stop. I mean, literally, I feel like I could go forever. And so it was really through counsel of friends. Because I want to keep going, but I can tell my body's breaking down. I want to see how far I can push the limits.
You want to see how far you can break your body down. See, this is where, as one of your friends, I want to say to you, no, stop that. You've got to be careful because you could actually do permanent damage. And you want to be a good steward of your body. But at some point you said, what? How far did you decide you thought it reasonable to go?
I actually a couple weeks ago, and it was really kind of the start of the Asbury Revival, and there were some thoughts around that because the Lord really did a work in my heart. During that time, I decided I was also running for revival. And just some things in my spirit shifted, and then just conversation you and I had, and a conversation other people had. I said, it's time to put a bow on this. And I told you, I'm going to do 151, and you said no. I mean, you're the reason why I'm doing 2 more, because you said no.
Well, because I thought if you're doing 151, if you're just going to pick, why would you pick that number? What's that number?
There was a lady in Australia, did 150 marathons back-to-back, tip-to-toe. I believe it will be Guinness qualified if everything gets turned in for her. And so I knew I was just a few weeks behind her.
Oh, yeah. So so 104 might be the record, but you thought in order to make sure that I get the record, I would need to do 151.
Correct.
So you at that point said, okay, I'll go that far. And that's when I said, wait a second, if you're going to do that many, why not do 153? Because 153 is a magical number from the Gospels. When Jesus says to them, throw your net on that side of the boat, and they caught so many fish, it was like just an insane miracle. But they counted the fish. I think I've written about this in 2 of my books. They counted the fish, and it ends up being 153. And the specificity of that number, it's not like it was a lot of fish. It's a number that obviously told the people of that day, like, you want to know how many fish they caught? I mean, if you're a fisherman in the Sea of Galilee and somebody says we caught 150 fish, they'd be like, what? Because it was not just some random number, we caught a lot of fish. But also, it just has this magical significance as a number to me because it's so random.
Well, it also, they've debated that it might have actually been the number of nations that were in the world at that time, too.
Well, that's what I mean. There's a lot of speculation on what does 153 mean. And I thought, if I were you, which I ain't, and my thighs can attest to that today, having run 22 miles yesterday. But I just thought how cool it would be to do 153. So your goal, of course, is to fly home tonight and tomorrow to run this final marathon in the bosom of your family.
Yeah, and actually the good news is the weather's going to be nice tomorrow because a lot of these marathons I've done them at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. One of those days I did it when it was minus 20 degrees below. like minus 20.
You don't need to say minus 20 below. It's implied by the minus.
Yes.
But wait a minute. So when you told me this, I got really upset. You were in Colorado?
Yeah, Woodland Park, Colorado.
So you're like up in the mountains.
Yeah.
Way high altitude, not enough oxygen.
8,500 feet of elevation.
Okay. So already insane. Like I can't function at that elevation because there's not enough oxygen. You decide, you're there with your family, you decide, okay, I'm going to do marathon up here. And if that's not bad enough, you're telling me it was 20 below.
Yeah, the decision was already made in my mind. There was no other option. Like I literally had no other option. Every day I'm going to run a marathon, so it was 20 below. I just had to figure out how to like not die. And so I mean, I had so much clothes on. I had a mask on. I couldn't even wear my glasses because of the mask I was wearing. But my eyes were freezing shut, literally. Like I'd have to wipe my eyes every 60 seconds because they were literally freezing shut. It was that cold on that day.
I think the Spanish word is loco. Honestly, I just can't believe it. Are you going to write a book about this?
100%. 100%.
I mean, I really can't believe this. Now, you're running for a number of causes. I want to talk about that because I do think now. Or do you have a website where people can go and find you?
Everything's been on my social media, which I'm the only at Malachi O'Brien on the planet. That's the beauty of having the name Malachi, is there's not a lot of them. You know, it's either the Bible or Children of the Corn, depending on where people's background is.
So Malachi O'Brien is you're on Twitter and on Instagram.
Twitter, Instagram, and I have a public Facebook page.
You have a public. Okay, so Malachi, people can reach you, whatever. But you haven't been doing this to raise money for anything, and that gives me a segue here. On this program this month, I got to say this before we go to the break, we are raising money for Food for the Poor. They feed the hungriest, poorest people in Central America, and what we're asking everyone who listens to this program to do is to give to Food for the Poor, to give anything, to give something. $72, think of this, will feed 2 kids in Honduras a nutritious meal twice a day for 1 year. This is unbelievable how far American money goes when you give it to Food for the Poor. 144 kids would bless 4 kids for an entire year, plus drinking water. We need you to do this. Metaxastalk.com. Metaxastalk.com. You'll see the banner. You can text Eric to 91999. Folks, please do this. Text Eric to 91999. We'll be back with Malachi O'Brien. Folks, I'm talking to my friend Malachi O'Brien. Malachi, once again, I got to tell my audience, I can't believe we never do this kind of thing, but you finished your 152nd consecutive marathon today. So you're going to go home tomorrow. You're going to do the final one. I had the privilege of doing this with you yesterday, and we had fun because I thought to myself, when you're running at that pace, you can actually talk. And so you and I talked, and we just had this wonderful fellowship, and we found ourselves, I mean, I don't know if I said this when I was talking to Albin before, but like we ran to New Jersey. We ran across the George Washington Bridge, which of course was my idea. I'd done this once before on my previous world distance, world record, personal record run. But the idea that from my house you could run across the Hudson to New Jersey on the bike path, that was insane and fun to do with you. We took pictures. But then on the way home, we passed a number of sites central to the story of Bonhoeffer. And I was able to point out where he stayed. That's the room where he stayed in 1939 when he made his big decision. And this is Riverside Church that welcomes Fidel Castro into its pulpit. But in 1939, when Bonhoeffer was here, he went to hear a sermon there. And this is all in my Bonhoeffer book. But I was able to tell you the story and then to say, and then that evening, he heard another sermon at this quote-unquote fundamentalist church a few blocks south on Broadway, and how delighted he was. And so it was just fun running with you. And if you come back to New York, I just want to do more of this with you because there's other fun things that we can do and see. But it was fun. So I just want to thank you for letting me be a part of what you're doing. This is historic. But I want to talk again about why you run. You said you're running. You're adopted. Talk about that.
Yeah. Again, I have 3 causes, but I was adopted when I was 3 years old by family. And that made a massive impact on my life. I mean, I don't have time to go into the backstory, but my birth parents were there's some major issues there. But family took us in when they didn't have to. And that deeply impacted my life. And then when I gave my life to Christ, my church family became my family. And I mean, God called me to ministry when I was 13 years old. And, I got married when I was 18 years old. And
hold on. That can't be right. When you told me that, I mean, I know this is true, but that, literally no one gets married when they're 18 years old in this generation. But you did. So you're 39, and you have a daughter that is...
I have a daughter that's 19, son that's 17, a son that's 14, a daughter that's 10, and then an adopted son who he's just turned 10. My other daughter's 11. And so, but again, my wife and I have always felt like we wanted to adopt, and we always thought we'd adopt from overseas. I went to India when I was in high school and thought that's where we would adopt. But then, through a series of events, this young man that was in our church was going to be put back in the foster care system. He'd been there his whole life. He'd been there almost his entire life, and we knew if someone doesn't adopt this kid, he's going to age out in the system. And so the Lord put on my wife's heart first and said, you know what, we can do it. We have a house, we have the resources. We just need to be able to say yes. So we did it, and it's been a challenge, but we'd never go back on it. We've learned so much. I mean, the Lord called us to adopt, and that's given us a deep heart for foster care and adoption. So many things we wanted up sharing with people. So that was one major cause, because the church can actually solve that problem in America. That's a tangible problem that the church can take to zero with foster care.
See, that's an amazing thing. As you know, last night we had dinner with Barry McGuire, who was my guest earlier in the program today. And, he talks about something similar, that if everybody who claims to be a Christian would joyfully share their faith, it would change the world. It would change the world. And you're saying something similar. And I say the same thing when I'm talking about my book, Letter to the American Church. If people would live out their faith, it would totally change the world. All these problems, I mean, when you talk about the foster care system, I want to cry when I think about the fact that there are kids struggling in that system, and that there are many Christian families that God might call to make these kids parts of their family. So I assume when you write a book on this, you're going to get into this.
100%. And that's one major cause. The other one is youth mental health. I mean, the reality is the majority of teenagers in our country right now are taking some sort of substance. Now that weed is legal in a lot of places, I mean it would blow people's minds if they knew what's going on with the next generation. And oftentimes we just want to ignore it and pretend it doesn't happen. But kids are being crushed with anxiety, overwhelm, peer pressure, so many things. And so the number of kids that attempt to take their own life is scary. And so we think we can make a difference by highlighting that and helping to equip parents and pastors and churches to know how to deal with this. So that was another big issue. And then the third issue that came about 2.5, 3 weeks ago was the Asbury Revival. You know me, we've talked about this before. I've had a deep heart and passion for revival. And so I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Greg Steer, runs Dare to Share, and he said, just say you start running for revival. So I said I'm going to do that, Greg. And it kind of, the Lord actually reignited my heart through the Asbury Revival.
Well, you went there.
I did. Yeah.
In the middle of setting this record, okay, you went to Colorado Springs with your family, ran in minus 20 degree weather. You're in New York now. I ran with you in Pennsylvania back in October. You also recently went to Asbury to see with your own eyes. Talk just for a minute about that.
Yeah, I ran at 1 a.m, finished at 7 a.m, got on a flight, got to Wilmore, Kentucky. Was there. Yeah.
I can't believe you do this stuff. You ran it from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. and got on a flight.
Correct. Flew to Asbury, was there for the final night. It was the collegiate day of prayer, walked in the room, and I've never experienced anything like it in my life. And I've been a part of a lot of amazing events, but it was a room full of about 1,200 Gen Z young people, handful of adults, but you could sense the tangible presence of God in the room. There was hunger, there was peace, there was a sweetness, there was kids praying for kids, people at the altar. It was such a moment. You didn't want to leave, and you didn't want it to end. You said, I'm part of, this is what we've been crying out for. And if everybody could experience this, it would change the church. It would change the nation. And so to be there that night for hours was a gift I'll never forget. It changed me.
I mean, we know this is the answer, and I believe that God is doing it. He's begun to do it. Asbury is just the beginning. We have our friend Greg Laurie's film is out called Jesus Revolution. I want to say to everybody, folks, see that film. This is the guy who came up with the phrase, the fame of revival leads to the flame of revival. When you're talking about revival, this is all beautiful. We'll be right back, final segment with Malachi O'Brien. Folks, welcome back. I still can't believe I'm sitting here. Malachi, you did it. Today you ran your 152nd consecutive marathon. Malachi O'Brien, you're going to be in the record books. You got to send 15 terabytes of videotape.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's to the Guinness book so that they can verify this. And then tomorrow, by God's grace, you run your 153rd marathon. You say you've been running for revival. You've been running for adoption. You've been running for teenage mental health. So we hope you're going to put this all in a book.
Mm-hmm. 100% going to put in a book.
Right.
I mean, I can't but not. It's been a gift that the Lord's given me to have 6 hours almost every day to be in my head and be in my thoughts. And I've reflected on so many things that I feel like I have to go on paper that I believe would really help a lot of people. So absolutely.
Will you remember all these thoughts? I mean, I just can't believe.
I've journaled almost every day after I've run, so I wouldn't forget any of it.
Oh my gosh. So now when you stop this, you're so obsessive that you said you're not going to stop running. You're just going to stop running a marathon a day.
Yes. I'm going to keep running, no days off, keep the running streak going. I'm going to apply for 2 other Guinness records I want to attempt in the future.
Now, can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm going to apply for the most consecutive half marathons ever completed, and I'm going to apply for the most consecutive half marathons run on a treadmill ever completed. Because I've had to run all these marathons outside.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious what it'd be like to do on a treadmill. So
I actually think like that would just be horrifying to run on a treadmill. Why would you do that?
It's
Why?
I want to test the limit. I want to find out the mental and physical limit. I think a lot of people never push themselves, so they never really discover who they really are. If you never go through trials or tough times, you never discover what you're really made of and what you really can accomplish. Most people live Technicolor lives in a 4K HD world, and they need to press through some hard times to discover who they really are. So, and then also I'm going to be running I'm going to apply for to be a part of a backyard ultra race in Arkansas this summer. That's going to be a really fun race.
That's the one where you have to run 4 miles every single hour, each hour?
At the top of each hour, fast or slow, but you have to complete 4 miles in the 4.166667. That's the technical distance. And it's you have to run till no one else comes to the starting line except for you.
Well, wait a minute. So you mean you run 4 miles?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then you stop.
Yep.
But then in a few minutes, you got to go again because it's the top of the hour again. And so if you're doing, let's say, a 10-minute mile, you do it in about 40 minutes. So then another 15, 20 minutes, you got to go again. So you're telling me that people will do that, and then another hour they'll do it again and again and again. And the question is how many hours? I mean, I can't believe that. And
believe it or not, there's a U.S. national team for this. There is a world championships of these backyard ultras that take place out of Laz, the Biggs backyard ultra outside of Nashville. He's the guy that started it. He's the guy that started the Barkley Marathon.
So what's the world record of that?
This is what's insane. It happened just a little less than a year ago. I believe the nation was hungry, but I could be wrong. But 101 or 104 happened just this last year.
Okay, that's several days.
Yeah, that's 101 hours. They call it a lap when you finish 4 miles. So they did 101 laps.
But that's 4 days.
4 days.
So you don't get to sleep for 4 days?
Nope.
You keep running for 4 days?
Yes.
Okay, I rebuke that idea. I totally rebuke that idea. Malachi, we achieved our goal. My goal was to get you in the studio today to talk about this. We're going to keep you around and do more talking either for tomorrow or another day. But I am just so thrilled that this worked out. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for having me on the show.